up, everybody? Welcome to Coffee Hour. My name is Paul Abernathy. I am your host for Coffee Hour. We are on time. It is Tuesday, May 6th. Getting your day started. Do have the Java on hand. It is a foggy, wet, kind of rainy, miserable day here in Virginia. I don't know where it is where you're at, but it is not so nice here. It was wet yesterday. I didn't do squat. I had a lot of engineering meetings but I tell you what, I didn't do squat outside. So maybe it's sunny and bright wherever you are. But anyway, thanks for joining me. If you've never been to Coffee Hour before, look, it's not just about exam prep. It's about the National Electrical Code. We talk about all different things. I talk about residential. We talk about commercial. We talk about motor, just about anything. If you have a topic you want me to talk about on the show, just go to paulabernathy.com. It's simple, Paulabernathy. Yes, I can spell my own name. .com, and you go there and you can actually submit a topic for a show. If you want a question answered, you can go there as well and post your question. It'll get answered in either email or on an upcoming podcast. So that's how we get a lot of our podcasts. And I have a backlog of Let's Ask Pauls. I got to get through those, but we've been so busy working on things on the back end. I don't know if you've noticed, the website's a little bit speedier. We've been working. I do a lot of the coding myself, believe it or not. And so I'm working on different things. It's a hobby of mine. I don't pay people to work on my website. It's probably why I'm not very high in the search engines. But anyway, I enjoy doing it. It's fun. And again, it's just part of some of the little things that I like to do. And if I'm not having fun, what's the point in doing it, right? Hey, thanks for joining me. If you want to let me know in the comments, whatever platform you're on, who you are, where you're from, what you got going on, if you're studying for an electrical exam, anything you want to share with us so we can share with everybody, all those type of things. We love to live vicariously through you and your success. So again, I get literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails and texts and messages from people that are successful, not just in our program, but just watch us or watch our videos and just want to share their experiences. And so, again, we appreciate it and we love seeing your success. Absolutely. I've got students that have been following me now for nearly 30 years, back when I was doing just uploads on AOL. So it's kind of cool to see. So anyway, thank you all. So again, do that in the comments. Today, also, I wanted to say, you did not see a replay yesterday at 5 p.m. Something happened with the recording. We are fixing it or trying to retain it, but it was something with EV Mux, and they're trying to figure out what happened with it, but it would not replay. They say they can get it fixed, but it was 4.3 gigabytes of data from that video. So I don't know why it wouldn't connect. So anyway, we'll replay it. You'll see the date on it when we do, if you want to watch the replay, talking about dryers and laundries and stuff like that. Also, during that conversation yesterday, Tom is in here. Tom, good morning. Glad to have you here. Yeah, proof we all did survive Monday. They had a question about whether or not that circuit for a dryer, if it was replaced, would it require GFCI protection, since the code now requires GFCI protection, whether it's hardwired or receptacle? And the answer to that is yes. Now, you wouldn't be required to change the circuit. If it was a 3-wire circuit, it's existing, and you weren't extending it or modifying it, then you wouldn't be required to change it. But if you did put it in, and you would have to put it on GFCI if you replaced it. Okay, so the rule in 406 would apply to that. I don't know if I touched on that. I wasn't thinking that was his question yesterday. I was thinking he was talking about something different. But anyway, that was, yep, Brandon, and I've already answered your question over there. So you need to go check it. Okay, already answered that question. So basically, you read the question wrong, Brandon. It was asking you the conductor's length, not the length of the circuit. So it was 181 feet times 2. Because that's the total length of the conductor in the circuit, going out and coming back. That was one of those questions where it's about the semantics of making sure that you actually read the question. So a lot of people get focused on the length of the circuit, which is one way. Doesn't matter that you have two conductors one way, The question wanted to know what was the length of the conductors, not the length of the circuit, which the circuit makes up both hot and neutrals, okay? Or in this case, 240 volt, so 2 hots. So it was trying to get the length of the overall conductors, not the circuit. So it's not a trick question. It's just kind of trying to train your mind into reading a question, not the voltage drop of the circuit, but the total length of the conductors. That's what it was trying to ask you. So that's why you got that wrong. That's why it was 362 or whatever. Okay. All right. Anyway, thank you guys. I've got a couple more shout outs here. Before we get into today's lesson, we're going to do NEC basics. I want to talk about the development NEC a little bit. We're going to look at, kind of a change to kind of give you an idea how things change and why we change the code every 3 years. I'm going to show you a great example of why we do that. It's a really good example. So hang tight for that as well. But let's finish some more shout outs real quick. Tara, glad to have you here. Northwest Alabama in the house. Let's see here. Brandon, I got you. I see you. Manny, wearing the bright green code nerd. Appreciate you, Manny. Thanks for joining us. And Battles Electric, there you go. Thanks for joining. Terrence, thanks for joining. Glad to have you here. Let's see, where am I at? I want to make sure I don't leave anybody out. Let's see here. The turntable. Yeah, that was my turntable. Wiki, wiki, wiki. That was my, there you go. Let's see here. What other educator in the world would ever do something like that? I'm just saying. I'm different. I get it. What's up, Rob? Glad to have you here. Appreciate you. There you go. Oh, Brandon, yes, I just answered. I did see your question and I did answer it. Kendra, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here. Rob, okay. Brandon says, I feel dumb now. No, don't feel dumb. That is the way questions are, man. And when you're studying for an electrical exam, it's so easy to get tunnel vision and realize that when you're looking at it, you've got to step back and actually read a question and read what they're asking. And it is the semantics of the word. So you're not alone. This happens to everybody. And I tell you, a lot of people, when it comes to exams, don't get lost in the weeds on things like a voltage drop or a calculation, one calculation that may not make sense or something like that. Because typically one calculation too is not going to make or break you passing the exam. I want you to know how to do it, but it's not going to make or break how you pass the exam. So don't get so locked in. And I'll give you some advice, Brandon, when you take your exam, because I think it's coming up close. Make sure you follow that 3-wave method and do not get locked in on a question that you're like, I got to answer it, and let it consume a lot of time. Mark it, move on. That's the best advice I can give to somebody in the last minute. If you're on an exam, mark it, move on. You can always come back to it. In that 3rd wave, you're going to answer it regardless if you're doing an educated guess or not. But in the beginning, answer everything you know right up front. Mark the ones that you don't answer within a minute. 2nd wave, try to work on those ones. Give them another minute to minute and a half. If you still can't answer them, leave it marked and skip it. Go to the next one. In the 3rd wave, you have to answer the question, even if it's an educated guess. If you want to still leave it marked, that's fine, but you at least have to put an answer and keep going. And then if you've got time remaining, then you can go back to those ones that are marked, that type of thing. Okay, that's the whole concept of what we need to do there. What's up, David? Glad to have you here. Let's see. Tino says, hey, Paul, I seen the code reference that you said you could still use branch circuits in the kitchen sharing the same neutral. You can, again, it's, for example, I used to do these efficiencies. So you got to remember, a multi-wire branch circuit is 2 circuits, or it could be used as a single circuit. But most of the time in the code, we can use it as 2 circuits. And one classic example of this is if I'm supplying a detached structure and I'm just going to serve lighting and receptacle loads. I'm not going to put a main breaker in there. I'm not going to put a panel in there. I do have a disconnect, which could be the switches. And I take a single circuit there. It could be a 12.3 UF or whatnot, and that would be where I would not need to have a panel out there, and I would not need to establish a grounding electrode system. I got the equipment ground, it runs with the circuit. But so the code has allowances to say that that is a single circuit, although we're getting two circuits out of it, a black and the red sharing the white. Okay, so that's just an extreme example. In the kitchen, nothing says that I can't run a 12.3 to the countertop, come to a common receptacle, and then go this way with the red and the splice to the white and go this way. And then the black will splice to the white and go that way. And I still have two circuits serving a countertop, that type of thing. So multi-wire brand circuits. Now people shy away from these things, one, because they just don't understand them. They don't understand that if you put it on a 2-pole breaker or 2 single poles with identified handle tie so that they are simultaneously disconnected, that you're going to understanding the concept of the neutral and how it works. If I have 20 amps on one and 20 amps on the other, then the neutral is going to see 0, okay, the way it works in a sinusoidal way. But it's a cancellation effect. But if I do it wrong and I put it on 2 individual breakers and they happen to be on the same leg in the panel because I don't put them side by side because that's how the panels alternate. If I do that, then I have a cumulative effect. I pull 20 on one and 20 on the other, I could have 40 on the neutral. And that's just not how you install a multi-wire branch circuit, right? So that's why it's important to use 2-pole breakers. That's why it's important to use 2 single poles with an identified handle tie. Keeps them together. Then you've got that cancellation effect going on. But it is definitely 2 circuits. Now, the question always comes up, but what about AFCI requirements? That type of scenario. Well, they do make AFCI devices that can go in the receptacle location. They make those as well, okay? So, they may make a 2-pole AFCI. It's probably going to be costly. So again, you have options, but it's up to you as the design professional to choose what you do. That was back before AFCIs. Today, as the technology emerged, I would probably just run 2 separate branch circuits and not worry about trying to find a 2-pole AFCI and things like that because of the costs and things like that. But you have options, okay? So, but as far as purely having a multi-wire branch circuit, is it 2 circuits? Absolutely, it can be. Shared neutral. But again, that doesn't come without the caveats that you have to be aware of. Let's see here, Peter, what's up? Hopefully you're in your program, you're working it. Let's see here. What does Battle say? You and Vince are very thorough in 680. I may be 15 per though. I'm not sure what that means. I may be 15 per through. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, we are very thorough in that program. And I'm excited that Vince is going to come and join me at the end of this year. So we're going to, right before the 2026 comes out, or right at the time it comes out, Vince is going to join me, a wonderful dude, and he's going to be in studio. We're going to try to do as many videos as we can. We're going to try to do some podcasts and over in the podcast area, and then we'll have a camera set up over there so we can have a casual. I want to do a leisure discussion where we have a nice drink, maybe a mixed drink, maybe a little bit of tippy, and we will have a conversation about all kinds of things like code panel development, his experiences on the road, things like that. I'd love to have a conversation with Vince, just all the things that he's into. He's all over the place. And so he's a great representative of Siemens. Siemens, if you're watching Siemens, anybody from Siemens is watching, dude, y'all lucked out. Okay. If anybody that you could have gotten, okay, you got a great guy because, dude, he is dedicated to the core. Okay. I'm just saying. What's up, Edgar? Glad to have you here. What's up, Jay? I see you, Jay. Thanks for joining. I will do some shout outs really quickly on that real quick before I get too deep into this. So we did send emails out. We're still sending them. So if you haven't gotten yours, relax. James, if you're in here, James, you got the 2023 grounding and bonding. I need you to go and register on our fasttracksystem.com website and send me your username so we can get you course set up. Val, I don't know if you're here, Val. You won a grounding and bonding course as well. I cannot seem, Jeff can't find your email if you send us your information course, Val, so make sure you send that. Paul, if you want the 2023 mastering the NEC? I think you said you did. You wanted to hold out for 2026, but our program could be, it could be over a year from now before that comes out. So that's up to you. But you're in Texas, so if Texas will adopt the 2026 pretty soon after it comes out. So that's a choice you have to make. Let's see here. The enhanced program, TNOH, you should have gotten your information on that. And your course should already be set up in your profile on fasttracksystem.com. If you forgot your password or information, you can use password recovery. Jay Ormond, you also have yours set up as well. Your 2023 enhanced exam prep should be in your profile under my courses, so you should already have that set up for you. Adam French, I don't know if we have you set up in your Mastering the NEC course yet. I think we do. I think I do have you set up already. Go check your profile. Paul was the only one left that that Jeff needed to get set up. Let's see. Don't ask about the coins and the knives and the VD cards, and that's a different email coming to you folks, because that's the one that's going to require some customization on some of those, that type of thing. Let's see here. Wire waffles, they have been added to the wheel. We did receive those in. Those, I think, Ben Menya and Dave Scott, you will be getting your wire waffles. Relax. Let's see. Just wanted to give an update on that. Let's see. What notes did Jeff send me? Melting Toast and John Moser, y'all should have gotten emails or copied on emails from the software in the estimating course, as well as the software for John. So I don't know how that's working out with this with the supplier for that. So keep me posted if they haven't been in contact with you. So other than that, the custom plates, a trade hog, folks, you'll be getting an email shortly on that. There was one trade hog premium, and Joey Fontanes. I haven't received anything from you on that. Terrence, I did receive a question from you, and then Red Dog. Again, reach out again, Red Dog, to make sure we have your contact. I think we do. I think it's Ruben, but just to make sure. And then Manny Sanchez, you got a custom plate. Make sure you reach out to us again, just because Jeff has a note here that he didn't see that he had your information, that type of thing. So again, just reach out to us and let us know again. And David, we got your information for your NFC promo card. So we're getting that all set up for you. So, okay, that's pretty much all I have updates for that, but don't worry. It'll all happen. Relax. You'll get your stuff. Folks. All right. Do I have any, Angel, what's up? Good morning. Let's see. I don't know what that's on LinkedIn by Mike H. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sorry. Let's see here. Tina says, but would you have to be on a tandem to trip together? All multi-wire branch circuits have to be on a 2-pole breaker or 2 individual handle ties. Okay. So they will trip independently. 2 single poles, it will trip independently. Okay, but since they have an identified handle tie, when one trips, it will cause the other to trip as well. There's no way it could not trip the other if the one trips. Although a lot of times they have what's called internal trip. So it basically will look like it's still on, but one has tripped, that type of thing. The key thing for the simultaneous disconnect is the ability to turn off the circuit, but they will work independently. Not a problem. Let's see here. Good morning, Robert. Glad to have you here. Gregory, thanks for joining us this morning. Let's see. Adrian, glad to have you here. Oh, percentage. You're about 15% through the 680 course. Yeah, that's a lot of videos over on Fast Tracks 2, folks. If y'all hadn't seen it, the whole series on swimming pools is over on it. And we get deep into the weeds. You know what I'm saying? Let's see. I'm glad I got to reconnect you and Vince. Yeah, I mean, me and Vince still communicate. I just don't see him as often because I don't travel as much as I used to. So we still email and still communicate, but I haven't really had talked to him in probably a month or two, at least. Let's see here. Charlie, good morning. Hashtag win, getting it in. John Santino, there you go. Good morning. Glad to have you here. You test in July. All right. Positive thoughts. Positive thoughts. Stay with us. You'll get it. Christopher, there you go. Let's see here. Ryan's boat. They say the greatest day and the worst day is the greatest day is the day you buy your boat. The worst day is the day you try to sell your boat. I still have a boat. I never tried to sell it. I did have a boat prior to this one, and I had no trouble selling it on Craigslist. So let's see here. What's up, Erie? Fast Track student in the house. Hey, all you out there that are Fast Tracks or in our Fast Tracks program, we appreciate you. There's the website if you're interested in our Fast Tracks program. Francis from Jersey. There you go. Do I sell the promo cards? Absolutely, we do. Over on our website, we do sell those NFC promo cards, and you can get them without winning one. There you go. And they're great because you can reprogram it, but you also share the love. Okay, so this is our way of people buying these, shares the love with us. They're promo cards, right? But they work with the NFC because they have a built-in NFC. Of course, you can reprogram that NFC for free. It's free apps on your phone, Apple or whatever, free to do that. But yeah, they're available over on our website. Just go to fasttracksystem.com/shop and look under the engraved products, that type of thing. What's up, Frank? Good morning. There you go, Val. Val, I did a shout out a little while ago. Make sure you email us again with your, for the 2023 grounding and bonding course. Just go to fasttracksystem.com, register for an account, and then send us your username. We'll get it added to your profile. Let's see. What's up, Alberto? Thanks for joining us. Good morning. Good morning. Joseph in the house. Good morning from New Jersey. New Places in the house. Good morning. Glad to have you here. Yeah, Charlie said the best boat to have is your friend's boat. That's right, because you ain't got to maintain it. I got to buy batteries for my boat because it's been sitting. So I'm going to get the gels. I don't think the gels go bad when they deplete like lead acids do. I'm not a battery expert. So boat is a hole in the water that you throw money into. I've got a aluminum tracker 175 TXW, I think it is. So it's 17 foot. 17.7. I love it. And we fish a lot. So we used to fish a lot. My wife, I got to get her back out on the water, that type of thing. What's up, Carlos? Good morning. Glad to have you here. All right. So let's get into some looking at some code and why we do what we do today in the codes. Let's go to the lesson. Okay. Again, keep letting me know who you are, where you're from. Love hearing from you. All right, so what we're going to learn today in this lesson, we're going to go through it pretty quickly. I'm going to show you some changes, a change that's significant to the 2026 NEC, and it's significant in a sense that it shows a classic example of why we changed the code to make things a little easier to understand. We might assume a lot, and the code is kind of the thing that's built on different cycles, and sometimes you read something and go, well, I don't know if that's what code's trying to say, and then you have to look back and say, well, okay, this makes sense. And a lot of times, believe it or not, the code can't have everything explained in black and white, but you have to understand the premise or why they're doing something. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is when somebody thinks, for example, that because calculation for, let's say, the service doesn't list something nice and neat as far as a load that you may have in the building, that you don't have to account for it. One of the classic examples of is Red Dog.
Woo, 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 woo. Big dog.
Is one of the classic examples of that is the EVSC. When people had electric vehicles and the charging, and before the code was very specific on it and adding the values that need to be included in the VA. Before that, people like, well, it didn't list anything, and we would argue that it wasn't an appliance, although it is an appliance, believe it or not. You can argue that all you want. It's an appliance. That EVSE is an appliance. So people would argue it, and and at the end of the day, they'd say, well, if it's not nice and niftily or neatly in the NEC, then I don't have to account for it. And that's not true. You have to, when you're doing a load calc, you have to account for all of the loads. And you have to find a place to put that load if it's not nice and neatly bound within the parameters of the NEC. It's still a load. So if I'm doing a load calculation, it can't be say, well, the code just doesn't talk about this kind of load, so I don't have to account for this load. That's not true. And I think that's kind of one of those things that I think is a misconception. What's up, Samantha? Welcome. All right, there you go. All right. So let's look at, so what we're going to do today, really, we're going to brief account of electricity in the infancy, identify the catalyst that brought about the NEC, explain how the NEC began and its purpose, explain how changes to the code evolve and why they evolve, and I'll give you that example. Terminologies, I will talk about that. We'll explain what type of information is found in the NEC, how it's laid out, just so you understand a little bit better. Explain why the NEC is concerned with equipment and material standards. This is another example why I think that, and I see all this on social media, when the 2023 got rid of the requirement to have a receptacle at the island or peninsula. You have to have the provisions there, but they got rid of it. I think that the NEC personally oversteps its bounds, and in a sense that they're saying, well, the data was submitted saying that little kids pull a crock pot off an island. Okay, well, we cannot protect everybody from themselves. I mean, that's not what the NEC is all about. We're protecting from persons and property from the effects of dealing with electricity, right? I think that we can sometimes go too far because we're trying to put everybody in a bubble. I get it. I hate to see children get hurt. I hate to see anybody get hurt, okay? But again, without going down the rabbit hole, at what point do we stop? You know what I'm saying? So if you're concerned about a cord hanging over the edge of your counter, remember, it can't be over an edge. It's more than 6-inch overhang. That's the way it always was. So it's coming down. If you're concerned, I have a crock pot. I put it on it. I don't have any kids. But I put the crock pot back so that I don't have this big loop of cord hanging down. There's a way you can do it. Pick a piece of tape and put it on the top if you're a concerned parent. Shit, we put the little things inside of receptacles and we end up getting tamper-resistant receptacles because we were concerned about kids sticking things inside of a socket, okay, inside of a receptacle, okay? I mean, at some point, we cannot mitigate all the risks that we have by putting things like that in the NEC. So that's why people have asked me why I believe that the data was submitted was dubious and why I don't agree with it, because I think it always can be skewed to a certain narrative, and I don't like that. That's not what I want to see in the NEC. But it's there. I'll enforce it, but I don't like that. I don't like when the NEC does that. And it's usually because of lobbyists or people that manufacturers, again, that try to push things in. Some are more reputable than others in certain things that they do, but it is what it is. But anyway, NEC needs to be concerned with the hazards that are involved with working with electricity, both personnel and properties, and that should be its focus, okay? Can't save the world type of scenario. Identify various trademark logos, okay, listing and label products, describe the role of the nationally recognized testing laboratories. Y'all have heard us call them NERDLs before. That's what NRTL stands for, Nationally Recognized Testing Laboratories. Y'all have heard of it, ETL, which is Intertech, UL, FM, all these different ones. There's the Canadians version, right? CSA, all those are nationally recognized testing laboratories. We'll explain the book's layout, book being the NEC, that type of thing. So there you go. All right. So what is the purpose and the history of the NEC? So 90.2a of the NEC says the purpose of this code is the practical safeguarding of persons and properties from hazards arise from the use of electricity. Not from the use of pulling a cord off of a counter that pulls a crock pot. I'm just saying. This is the purpose, okay? This code is not intended as a design specification or an instructional manual for the untrained person. I get this question all the time because people call me and they are DIYers, do-it-yourselfers, homebodies, and I have nothing wrong with that. You know, I have on a Facebook page, I posted a question about my mini excavator, and you know, as a little piece, I didn't know what it was, and this is the reason nobody wants to use social media to ask questions anymore, because the people came back and said, it's a light bulb, electrical guy. It just was really a lot of smart ass responses. And I'm like, dude, I was asking a legit question. There's a smart ass everywhere. There's always somebody out there that's trying to pound their chest to make a stupid comment that just wants to act like they're more intelligent than somebody else. And I'm like, dude, just give us the answer. I don't need the commentary. I don't need the smart ass response. And that's probably why I don't mess with a lot of social media. When I'm on social media, I give you an answer and I give you the code reference, that type of thing. So I guess there's a difference in how people use it. I just have that to me, that's not having a sense of humor. I went there for it. I don't need somebody, but that's just me. But the point was, there are a lot of people that are untrained that want to use the NEC like an instruction manual, and that is not what it's for. It's complicated enough as a document, right, that we do not want to treat it as an instruction manual. Although there are performance and prescriptive requirements all through the NEC, that's kind of like, all right, well, performance means that if you do the prescriptive method, it'll meet the performance of what it's trying to achieve, right? That type of thing. So a prescription, like on a medicine bottle, you follow this, then you'll achieve the goal you're trying to achieve, right? So the code is kind of written that way, but it is certainly not for the untrained person. Now, since 1911, the National Fire Protection Association has been responsible. Now, it was around in 1800s before 1911, but NFPA took kind of ownership and responsibility of maintaining it and publishing it and having various meetings in order to be able to facilitate its changes or additions and growth. Okay, the NEC has been revised every 3 years since 1975. Before that, it might have been 2 years, then it went to 3 years, and it might have been it was consistently every 3 years since 1975. So we're in the middle of, again, that's why you see now it's 2023 is out. The 2026, 3 years later, is probably going to come out right at the end of this year, probably November-ish. It'll be ready for the 2026. And then a lot of states, about 2-3 months, maybe even less, will start adopting it. And there are states out there that literally drag their feet for years, that type of thing. And they use the excuse that the contractor can't afford to keep buying these code books. Come on, folks. It's not. They're not that expensive. Okay, it's part of what we call doing business. Okay, investing in code books and all that kind of other stuff. All right, hold on for a second. I don't know why looked like I was sinking down or something, like I'm a midget. All right, so there you go. What's up, Alex? Good morning. Glad to have you here. All right, so code knowledge check. Y'all all got this. How often is the NEC revised currently? It is every 3 years. Okay. All right, there you go. Every 3 years. All right, let's talk a little bit about some terminologies first. Throughout the NEC, you're going to see various tables. This is an example of a table that is table 210.21b3. This is receptacle ratings for various circuit sizes, right? So here is a 15 amp receptacle rating, 15 amps, a 20, 15 or 20, yada, yada, yada. So this is what we refer to as a table in the National Electrical Code. You're going to see various tables. It's important that you understand how the tables are used, how they function, and get used to looking at a table. But also remember that under a lot of these tables, you'll have notes. And there's a big difference between something that's in the code that may be what's called an informational note versus something that is a note. If you see a note that's underneath a table, for example, then that means the note is very much applicable or associated with the table. It means you have to follow those notes. If you see something that's just an informational note, it's basically exactly how it sounds. It's informational. Okay, it used to be called fine print notes, but fine print is more in the context of a legal document, so it didn't really make sense because, again, the NEC has no legal binding status in itself. It has to be adopted and utilized by a jurisdiction. So once it is adopted as use in the state or by local jurisdiction, and that becomes part of the local governing rule. Now, those notes are very much applicable to the table. So keep that in mind. Not informational notes. It's just good information, okay? And I'm a big believer in informational notes because they help give you guidance throughout the NEC when they're done properly. We don't want them to add confusion. We want clarity. Also, throughout your NEC, you're going to see what I call pictographs or diagrams or figures, okay? So here you see a figure that is basically showing you the receptacles and plug caps or attachment caps, things that are basically different configurations, okay? So you'll see these throughout the NEC. Okay, so this is configurations for grounding type receptacles and attachment plug caps used for recreational vehicle supply cords and recreational vehicle lots. Okay, so you'll see all these in, for example, 551, and it'll show you the different configurations, that type of thing. So you're going to see these throughout the NEC. Okay, obviously these are very specific. Okay, even though they may look familiar, but in this case, since this figure is in 551, it is very specific to 551, which is going to be what? Recreational vehicle application. NEC terminologies. Okay, so we'll use this, for example, present format. Okay, so here you see this has happened to be Article 530, motion picture and television studio and remote locations. You'll see these little N's in the side column. That lets you know this is new. Now, it could be all totally brand new, or it could be just moved from somewhere else and it's new to this location, okay? So you see those type of things is what you'll see, all right? You'll see, again, you'll see language that is kind of grayed out. This is pretty good, for example, when you have an application where you want to go to the code and see why something may have changed. And here you can see that because this is gray, okay, then it is been grayed out because it is something new that has been added. Going back to this table right here, Edward, because when you have a duplex receptacle, if you go look under 210.21b3, it says that in a duplex receptacle, that's two or more, that a 15 or 20 amp rated receptacle can be on a 20 amp circuit. But a 15 amp rated receptacle can only be on a 15 amp branch circuit. That's what it's talking about here, okay? But because the internal guts are exactly the same, it is okay for it to be on a 20. Whereas if you put this 20 on a 15, then it would imply that I could pull 20 amps of load through a 15 amp circuit, which would be, one, wrong because it would overload the circuit, and two, could put undue stress on the overcurrent protective device. It would never hold. So, okay, but here, not an issue, okay? So that's why that's that way. All right, so here you get it. So again, informational notes just give you good explanation. I love them, I think, but I don't want to turn this into an instruction manual. So I don't want to keep adding informational notes. And this is what the code panels struggle with, is that there's some on the code panels that love informational notes. And then there's some folks that do not like informational notes. They say, but look, remember the purpose. It's not to become an instructional manual. I don't think, in my opinion, that's what the informational notes are trying to do. I think that that's people that are just overly purist. I think what we're looking at is code panel members, and I shout out to you code panel members. Informational notes can give direction, especially to complex code sections. And we can use the informational note to give guidance. We are not going to create code, obviously, in an informational note because you can't enforce it, but we want to use it to give direction. Okay, now where do we get the explanation that you can't use informational notes for code, or no inspector can cite an informational note as code? 90.5C is going to say that, okay? Now, this is broken into different styles. So what you see here, you have the heading, which is the article, right? Then you'll have here, which is the section, right? Which is .26 is the section, right? And then you'll have parts, right? And then you'll go down, you'll have the various parts, right? And then you'll have subparts, or many people in the past would call them subdivisions, things like that, okay? So you have this hierarchy of how the code is listed. So you have your article, you have your section, and then you have your parts, part A, and it's broken down that way. Part A, part B, okay? All right, so other things to remember is that in the code, you're gonna see various things. What's up, high voltage? Welcome, glad to have you here. Better late than never, my friend. All right, you'll have what's called mandatory rules and permissive rules, okay? And you'll have exceptions. You need to get familiar with these things because when you read it, you'll see something that may say that it shall or shall not be done. Those are mandatory rules, okay? If the code tells you something shall be done, then you have to do it. If something says it shall not be done, then you shall not do it. And those are all covered in 90.5b, okay? But you have certain applications which say, okay, I'm gonna let you do something as long as you follow these permitted rules. And so when you see a phrase that says shall be permitted or shall not be required, those are permissive, meaning it's permitted to do something, but you're not required to do this. You can if you want. So follow the general rule, but I'm gonna allow you to do this. You'll be permitted to do this if you follow this. That's what it means to be a permissive rule. Or it may say something like so and so and so shall not be required. Okay, so again, you can do it if you want, as long as it doesn't violate some other rule in the code, like creating objectionable currents in 250.6, for example, then it says, shall not be required, but if you want to do it, and it may give you an alternate method using the permissive rule than what a more rigid mandatory rule might be. So being aware of the structure, and when something says shall or shall not, means you can't. If something's permissive, it's like, I'll let you, if you want to do it as an alternate way, but again, you have to understand the code and how it's written, okay? Now, exceptions. Exceptions appear in italics and explain when and where a specific rule does not apply. So exception is an exception to a rule. So you'll see something and then, like you see right here, okay, you see this exception's kind of italicized, okay? So it says portable luminaires shall be listed, except portable luminaires used as properties on a motion picture set or television stage set on a studio stage or lot or on location shall not be considered portable luminaires for the purpose of this section, okay? So you have the section requires certain things, but if it's on the set here, then they're not to be considered portable luminaires. And if that's the case on these specific locations, then I don't have to meet the more stringent rules, that type of thing, because of the exception. Okay. So anyway, caution, be advised that the local authority having jurisdiction has the ability to amend the code requirements, consult with the proper authorities to obtain applicable guidelines. So I would say that I am really against localities modifying and changing the code. I would say that. When I came to Texas originally, when I went to Texas, they had a laundry list of modifications that they made to the NEC. It's called the North Texas Advisory Board. And I got on this board and I looked at it and I'm like, they were doing things like allowing you to group up to 25 disconnects in one location when we know that the code requirement is going to be at up to 6 per service, right? And I was like, where the hell are y'all getting these things from? They're just making them up. Another example they had an exception was a suspended ceiling. The tie wires that support the ceiling grid, you could hang up to 2 raceways or 2 MC cables per support wire. Unless that support wire in that grid system has been evaluated to support that added weight, nothing gives you the permission to do that, but they had an amendment for that. And I was like, where did you get that from? Are you just going off of historical data? Ceilings haven't fell down? Did you ask the manufacturers of the grid? Because we're required to have our own independent support from the ceiling to the grid to support our wires and boxes. So where did they get it at? And it was just a local amendment that the local jurisdiction said, it's okay, it'll be fine. But there was no basis for it. So I got them wiped out and got them removed because it doesn't make sense. Just follow the code. It's simple. Now, With that said, there are some things in different jurisdictions around the country that may require some type of amendment. I'll give you a great example. California. So in the National Electrical Code, the code says when a ceiling grid supports a luminaire, the luminaire has to be connected to the grid. Code says that, okay, in 410. Now, if you independently support your luminaires, okay, let's say drop-in recess trophers, okay, or troffer, however you say it. If we drop those 2x4s in, let's say, and I independently support them, they're not being supported by the grid. So if the luminaire is not technically being supported by the grid, then I do not have to secure the clips from the recessed luminaire to the grid because the luminaire is not being, quote, supported by the grid. So that's how the code reads. Well, they modify that in, say, California, and they say, I don't care whether you independently support I don't care whether or not the luminaire is supported in itself, it's still going to be connected to the grid. That's not what the code says, but that might be a modification that they make based on historically due to a lot of earthquakes and other things like that. So that may be something they do. So there's also other areas of the country where they may modify something based on the known conditions of that location. And it may differ from the NEC because the NEC is nationwide and it's not specific to any one region. Right? So I get some amendments. I get it. But in the most part, I'm not a big fan of any of those amendments for the most part. Okay? All right. So you'll see this in here. Now, you see this little dot? This tells you that something was removed from a previous edition. Okay? All right. Provide an example of a mandatory rule in the NEC. A mandatory rule would, for example, would be that you shall have readily accessible to, let's say, overcurrent protected devices in a panel. So you got the 110.26 working clearances. Okay, so those are going to be, for example, mandatory rules on working clearance and things like that. That's a kind of an example of that. Okay, here's another example of mandatory. The total degrees of bend in a tube or conduit shall not exceed 360 degrees between pull points, 358.24b. That's a shall not. So that is between pull points. So if I'm running a tubing, EMT is a tubing, okay, which is also a raceway, but it is not a conduit. Rigid metal conduit, intermediate conduit, all that between boxes or between a panel in a box. It's a complete system. Between point A and point B, we can't have more than 360 degrees of bend. So no more than 490s, right? It's a good example. Also remembering that offsets count, things like that. Any offset that changes the elevation, 15 degrees down, you add up all those degrees. You cannot exceed 360 between pull points. That's why we put a junction box there that's properly sized and it breaks up that pull between the pull points. So now you have a pull point, and then you might have a box in the middle in order to make sure you don't exceed 360 degrees. The point is, it says it shall not exceed. That's a mandatory rule. You are not going to see. There's no exception to this rule. Okay? An example of a permissive rule. Okay? Now, let's read how this one says. It says, where there is no objection because of weakening the building structure in both exposed and concealed location, cables or raceways shall be permitted. Okay? Permissive to do this. Permitted to be laid in notches of wood stud joists, rafters or other wood members where the cable or raceway at those points are protected from penetration by nails or screws by a steel plate at least 1/16 of an inch thick and of appropriate length to cover the opening or cover the notch, if you will, installed to cover the area of the wiring. The steel plate shall be installed before the building finish is applied, 300.4A2. So, shall be permitted. So, again, we're talking about what? We're talking about notches, not your board holes. They got their own rules for 1.25 inches from the edge of the board hole to the edge of the framing member. And it applies to both sides of the framing member, by the way. That was clarified in 2023. Okay. So You can notch if you want, or you can use a notch. You're permitted. Doesn't mean you're required to notch it, but I could notch if I wanted, depending on what I have. And again, as long as I'm using a nail plate and as long as it's covering the entire notch and it's covering the wiring method, the cable with that steel plate, I'm good to go. Okay, so that is example. You're not required to notch, but you could notch if you wanted. Again, as long as it doesn't mess with the integrity of the framing to do that. And I'm an electrician. I'm not a framing guy, but I can look at if I had a stud that's versus just an interior wall that's really not a supporting member, and so then I could notch it. I am certainly not going to notch a framing member that is supporting a direct dead load, on the structure. I'm not a contractor. I'm not a carpenter, but that's common sense. Okay. Anyway, that's an example of shall be permitted. All right. So other things here to look at. So you'll see these little triangles in here. Okay. Triangle indicates, this icon indicates text deletions and figure table revisions. Okay. So something's been changed here to this section. Okay. Here you see that little dot we talked about. This icon indicates where one or more complete paragraph has been deleted or moved since the last edition of the NEC. So if you see that little dot in there and you're wondering what the hell that is, something's been removed, put somewhere else, or that paragraph has been deleted in entirety. Okay. The N, as I told you, that means that is something new. Okay. So it could be a new section, could be a new article, could be new or just moved from somewhere else right here. So when you see that N, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's totally brand new, right? But it means that it either is brand new or it came from somewhere else in the NEC. The highlighted text you saw us talk about earlier, it indicates a change. Okay, so you know that something was added. So what is neat when you're learning the code is have a previous edition, maybe the 2023, when the 2026 comes out, and then you go and look and see a different article, and then go to a specific section and see what's grayed out and what wasn't grayed out previously, and that's a good way to learn about code changes. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean you understand why they changed, but you get to see what changed between one section to the next section, or what might have happened during that code development period. You with me? Okay. All right, so the normal layout of the NEC, all of you should be familiar with this, hopefully, because this is going to save you a lot in understanding how the flow of the code works. All right, chapter 1 is general. That's going to be your general information. If you're exam prep, this is going to be important because it kind of gets you where you need to be. If you're looking at a question on an exam and you want to think, okay, I'm going to use bold scanning. Do I use the index? How do I get there? Chapter 1 is general requirements. In the 2026 code, you're going to see a lot of things change in Chapter 1. You're going to see calculations that were in 220. That's going to move up into Chapter 1. Obviously, definitions are still going to be there, but you're going to see some of those changes that are going to take place in there. Okay, make sure I didn't lose anything here. Okay, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is going to cover your wiring and protection. Again, Article 240. 210, 225, 230, all those type of things are wiring and protection. Chapter 3, this is wiring methods and material. Again, Chapter 3 being 334, for example, for non-metallic sheet cable, rigid metal conduit, 344, all those type of things. All of those different types of wiring methods. So if your question's about a wiring method or a wiring type, you're going to be in 300. But also, all of those general requirements for wiring methods, okay? Depth of cover, 300.5, all that stuff. That stuff's going to be in Chapter 3 as well, so get familiar with it. And one way to study is to take a chapter at a time and go look at it and get a good understanding of what's included in the chapter, okay? In fact, create flashcards that can do that. It helps you just get a little bit better, okay? And then Chapter 4 is equipment for general use, okay? 430 for motors, for example. All those type of things. All of those Chapter 4, those 400 type articles are all going to be in there. Now, Chapters 1 through 4, it's going to contain requirements that apply generally to all electrical installations, okay? 250 for grounding and bonding, that's protection, that's in Chapter 2. Applies general for all types of electrical installations. So if it's a general question, general understanding, it's going to be in Chapter 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, you have chapter 5, 6, and 7. Special occupancies. 500, for example, 500, 501, all those for RVs, mobile homes, all those type of things. 500, hazardous locations, things like that. All of that's going to be in special occupancies, okay? There's something unique about them, that type of thing. Fuel dispensing stations, all that is in chapter 5, okay? Now, chapter 6, special equipment. Things like, you have special equipment that's going to be utilized for swimming pools in 680, 690, PV applications, all those special equipment provisions, okay? Elevators, things like that, 620, all that's going to be special equipment, specialized stuff, uniquely different, okay? And it's all going to be tightly in there. Now, you are going to see in the 2026 NEC a little bit of restructuring to make it make sense a little bit better. And I think you're going to be pleased, even though you may have to learn some new articles. You may have to learn some new section layouts. It's going to make sense in the next cycle. But right now, that's what you've got. Now, chapter 7, special conditions like remote control and circuits, that in 725. Things like that. 700 for emergency systems, 701 for legally required, 702 for optional, all those type of things. There are special conditions that you're dealing with are going to be covering information in there, okay? Now, one thing to remember, 5, 6, and 7, they can supplement or modify the requirements of any of these chapters 1 through 7. I'll give you a classic example. So in 680, when it talks about equipotential bonding and extra things that you have to do, like for example, if I'm running a circuit to a pool pump motor, I have to have an insulated equipment ground, right? Well, if you go back and look at 250, if you look at 250.122, it says that the equipment ground can be bare, covered, or insulated. However, when I go look at 680, specifically, let's say to that branch circuit to a motor, it's requiring it to be an insulated equipment ground, right? And not smaller than 12. Those are supplementing or modifying the general rules that are in what? 250.122 or chapter 2. So that is when you see 5, 6, and 7 can change or modify something that might be under the general requirements, okay? So you got to understand how that flows, okay? Now, chapter 8, that's all your communication stuff. CATV, power network or network-powered broadband, all those type of things, antenna coaxial application, all of that. That comes under chapter 8. Now, how is it enforced? Well, it's not subject to the requirements of chapters 1 through 7, so it doesn't have to meet these rules unless it references those. A good example of this is 300.4, when you have to protect the cable with nail plates and things like that. Well, under communications in chapter 8, it typically will make reference to something in chapter 3. If something in chapter 8 makes a reference to something in chapter 3, for example, then guess what? You follow the rules in chapter 3 because it was referenced directly in chapter 8. And that's how it works, okay? So it is referenced in chapter 8. Now, good news about chapter 8 and 800 is now it has a lot of its own requirements that mirror the general type of requirements that we have for normal wiring methods in chapter 3, most notably 300, right? So now in chapter 8, 800, the change in the 2023 was now we have kind of that home base to go for communication systems if you deal in a lot of those communication system type of things, okay? Chapter 9, the tables. We're so familiar with all these tables. We get chapter 9, table 1 for the raceway fill and all those associated notes, which are applicable notes, right? Because they're not informational notes. That's all those notes that are under chapter 9, table 1, where we have the fill requirement rules, right? And then we have also all of these other different types of tables, okay? Well, chapter 9 and all of those tables are applicable when they are referenced elsewhere in the code. And they are referenced all the time throughout the NEC. So it makes a reference to a certain table, then it very much is applicable, okay? So for me and you, from a standpoint of what's applicability, I am going to use all of those tables in chapter 9 And I'm going to go, for example, if I go back there to do the raceway fill, I'm going to need to find what's the conductors, approximate area, all that type of stuff. Very much applicable. Also, when we're doing other things like voltage drops and things like that, we need to know what the circular mills is of certain conductors once they get, once they're 4-aught and less. But once they get over 4-aught, we know that a 250 kc mill is 250,000 circular mills. But when we're under that 4-aught and less, we need to go to the table to see that a 4-aught is 211,600 circular mills. So we can kind of do those things. So again, tables are very much applicable when they're referenced somewhere else in the NEC. Okay. Now, informational or informative annexes A through J, and I think Tom talked about an informative annex yesterday. And again, they're not enforceable. They are, and one of the big ones is the one that has calculations. Okay. And going to look at informative annex D, for example, can be very helpful, but they're not enforceable. Nothing back there is enforceable. But it is good information. And so it sometimes can be a lifesaver to go back and just look at informative annex. For example, informative annex C tells you the raceway fill. If all the conductors are the same size, then it is basically derived from the same rules that are in Chapter 9, Table 1, but it doesn't assume different sizes of conductors. So informative annex C is a great place to go if you just want to know how many of the same size conductors I can put in a raceway and not exceed the fill requirements. But what most people don't realize is that is only for fill. If I put all those conductors in the raceway, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to get the ampacity out of it, because I'm probably going to have more than 3 current carrying conductors in there, and I've got to do what? I'm going to have to make an ampacity adjustment accordingly, and that's going to reduce the amount of current that those conductors can carry. But it doesn't change the fact that I could still put that many conductors of the same size in that raceway. But that's all informative annex C is doing. So a lot of people think, oh, I just go to informative annex C, I can put 15, 12 gauges in this raceway, and they think that, boom, that's it. And then they go out and they install it, and then an inspector comes along, who rightfully so looks at it and goes, wait a minute, that conductor had a certain number of amps before you did what you did. Now, because of 310.15c and the number of current carrying conductors that are in there, you got a conductor now, due to the heat, can't effectively carry the current that you're trying to use it for. Now you got a problem. And the guy goes, well, I just used informative annex C. And then you kind of look foolish because the guy said, dude, that's just a raceway fill. I'm not gigging you for that. I'm gigging you because now you have a conductor that might have been good for 30 amps or 20 amps, and now it's only good for 10 amps. And that's not going to work. Okay. So there you go. Not enforceable, but just great information. Recognized testing laboratories. These are some of the main ones here. I'm sure there are other ones. You can see that these are all governed by OSHA. And so OSHA will put out a list of the all of their NRTLs that are recognized, and those that keep theirs maintained, if you will. So equipment that is listed, labeled, or could be both, or identified for a specific use, okay, shall be installed and used in accordance with any instructions included in the listing, labeling, or identification. That is 110.3b, right? Okay. So here you see all of these different manufacturers. Let me give you a little word of caution. Okay. Here's a good example. This is a wire waffle. Okay. Hashtag wire waffle. The wire waffle has the UL, I believe it has the CUL US on it. So that's a combined mark. Means it is been acceptable for use in Canadian applications and in the US. And they basically, UL is conformity standards, saying it can be used for both. Okay. So it's got that on here. CSA, as you see right here, they have their own standard that may allow conformity to use in the US. It's both North America, but being used in Canada versus the standards that are used in the US. But they're both nationally recognized testing laboratories. Okay. So again, wire waffle, hashtag wire waffle. All right. So I see a lot more FM products on fire alarms type of products. I see one thing to remember here of all of these. See this right here, this CE? This is not a safety standard. So you do not accept CE as an acceptable standard. That is a European standard for conformity that is basically manufacturer enforced manufacturer guidelines. It is not the same safety standard that we would use here in North America. These are, this is not. So you may see CE on something that is not the same as the safety compliance marks that you would see with UL, ETL, MET, FM, and CSA. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is very common on European products, but I would never accept an electrical installation that had a CE mark on it alone. Okay, that's me. So let's just keep that in mind. Now, that also is explained in the front of the NEC. Okay. But one thing I'll remind you of something, just so you maybe you don't know this, but when you manufacture, let me talk to you about how this works with wire and cable, just so you can understand it, get a scope of this. Because everybody thinks it has to be UL. It does not always have to be UL. Okay, that's the first thing. When a product is made like wire and cable, we have to make it to a certain standard. For example, copper, there is no standard except for ASTM standards, which are voluntary standards. So we agree, all manufacturers agree to make it and follow some kind of ASTM standard. Okay. Whether it's copper, there's B3, B8, B787, that type of stranding. And then you have aluminum, which can be B800, B801, B836 for single input. That's a stranding class. That is not a UL standard. That's an ASTM. That's voluntary. And all the manufacturers agree to follow that. Okay, so at least we have a standard. Once that product, that bare product, is insulated or it's put into a cable assembly, then it gets evaluated by what's called a nationally recognized testing laboratory. Okay, now, when we make that conductor or we make that cable and we insulate it, we are following the UL ANSI standards for how much insulation goes on it, what it's designed to do, how we test it, whether it's flame propagation or whether it can go in a cable tray. We do all this testing and we apply what's called a UL ANSI base standard. Okay, so that is a standard that UL years ago, they helped develop these standards. They work together with the ANSI process. They create a construction standard. Once we make it to that standard, okay, then it has to be evaluated. So there's another evaluation where in the manufacturing of wire and cable, we have a third party come out and take samples, or they take samples of our product out in the field without our knowledge. They take those samples and they make sure that we are making it based on the ANSI standard. Everything has a base ANSI, everything that's listed has a base ANSI standard, okay? A UL ANSI standard, how they have to make it, what's the thickness, all this kind of stuff. The third party evaluation typically is done by the nationally recognized testing laboratory, and they make sure that we actually make something to meet the standard that we said we were making it by. And if it meets it, we're allowed to put that little mark on it, to let you know and let the inspectors know, to let everybody else know that if it's required to be listed, labeled, or both, or identified for specific use, that's an easy way to tell. I can tell that this wire waffle, whether the inspector likes it or not, it's been evaluated, and they should accept it. They should not reinvent the wheel. It's been evaluated. That's why we pay the money to put that mark. I can promise you that Hunter and them pay niftily to be able to put that UL mark on there, because UL doesn't say, we'll give you one price and we'll let you put a UL mark on everything. No, they get a cut of every one of these, okay? They get a little bit. Every time that mark is used, they get a little bit, okay? I can tell you in our wire, every time we put that mark, every 24 inches or whatever our marking requirement is on that wire or on that cable, they are getting a cut, okay? Some are cheaper than others. UL is not cheap, but it's a recognizable mark. So again, it avoids confusion in the field. When people see UL, they're like, okay. But I thought it was important that you understand that there's more than one process. You make something based on a UL ANSI standard, and then you have to evaluate. So I could have a piece of wire made based on the UL ANSI, but I could have ETL Intertech actually do the third-party evaluation, and I can put that ETL mark on it. Get what I'm saying? So it doesn't always have to be UL. Now, UL is well known, and I like UL, but they're not the only player in the game, okay? And not all of these standards, by the way, do every piece of equipment. So UL does almost everything. ETL may not do the same number as UL, and MET maybe even, they may only third parties do this on a limited number of products. Okay, that's why you have many of them here. Okay. FM, for example, may not get into bigger equipment, electrical equipment. It might stay around the fire alarm and all those type of things. That might be their niche market, that type of thing. All right, discuss an example of manufactured equipment that often overlooked. Here we go. So this right here is a typical exhaust fan. If this unit is to be installed over a tub or shower, for example, it must be marked as appropriate for the application. That means to be used in a wet or damp location, and be connected to a GFCI ground fault circuit interrupter protected against. That's what I'm not saying, but again, if you go buy an exhaust fan and you happen to want to stick this over a wet or damp location, over a tub or a shower, then it may or may not be listed or marked for that type of application. You just go grab one and use it. You need to make sure that it is listed and labeled for use in those specific locations, okay? And if it is, it'll have its own instructions that come with it. That's so important too, because people buy our wiring cable and they think that when I write an article and we put it on our website, or we write something about doing something with wiring cable, they think that that is part of its listing and labeling. It's not. That's just manufacturer's recommendations. That is different than the literature that must be submitted with the electrical equipment for its evaluation. So when you get a GFCI, you get these exhaust fans, you get a piece of equipment like an air handler, things like that, they come with a manual. They come with a book that was evaluated along with the equipment. And so it's very much applicable to the equipment, so you have to follow its rules. That's part of its listing and labeling. We make wire and cable. We're not going to give you any document. Okay, so anything that we make on our website is basically just good information. It may help you, but it's not part of its listing and evaluation. That makes sense? That may avoid a lot of confusion that people have out there, okay? Instructions, John says, instructions, what are instructions? I know, right? Nobody follows those. All right, let's see here. All right, additional electrical requirements. Again, be aware local ordinance can amend the code. They must be followed, that amendment, whether I agree with them or not. You got to follow them. Always consult with an AHJ before beginning a project. I tell this to my brother all the time. If you're on a project, and hopefully don't go anywhere, guys, because I want to show you one of the reasons why the code changes. So if you're still here with me, just wait. I can show you that. Before I go, I'm going to show you a neat change in why things changed. And it has to do with existing dwellings. So you definitely want to stick around for it. Don't go anywhere yet. Even if I'm boring the hell out of you, don't go anywhere yet. But one of the things I say, that if there's something that you don't understand the code and you think it doesn't make sense, or you think that could be interpreted in a different way, that's going to cost you money to change it if you get a different interpretation, look, do me a favor. Don't hesitate to reach out to the AHJ, the inspector, the building official, to ask a question. Okay, and maybe you're the kind of person that says, "Well, I'll just do it and see if it fails." Well, that's okay. If that's a little something and you're thinking, "I'll just do it," maybe we'll have the same meeting of the minds. But if it's a big thing, then look, reach out and ask them before you do it. Okay, because again, we don't get paid to do things. What? We don't get paid to do things twice. We get paid to do things once. Okay. Adam, it's a connector. I don't see why I couldn't use it for low voltage. I don't know why I couldn't. So there is even less of concern with low voltage and communication than would be with this. So I don't see why you couldn't use it. It's simply a connector. That's it. I think it'd be fine. All right. It's UL listed as a connector, and so it's designed for non-metallic type cables. So I think it'd probably be fine. Let's see, where else am I? Okay. Yeah, Tom says it's professional courtesy. I agree. The problem with, and that comes from us that were inspectors, that had been inspectors, and I oversaw inspections and engineering division. And I agree. I think it's common courtesy. Reach out. The problem, I think, what happens is that, and I see this teaching all over the country for years, is it's not all electrical inspectors are created equal, and some of them hold a grudge, some of them can hold a chip, some of them have a God complex. Some electricians don't want to learn new things. Sometimes we have electricians that are confrontational. We have electricians that don't work well with people. They don't have a great personality. We have other people that are always trying to get you, gotcha, okay, that type of thing, or somebody that wants to pound their chest, and so it makes for confrontation. So over time, after a couple of times, they just don't want to talk to them. My brother, for example, is the greatest guy in the world to talk to. He literally hates calling an inspector. One, because he will get mixed reviews, mixed things, two different inspectors saying two different things, and it's confusing. So he calls me, and then I know, and I'll tell him what the interpretation should be. And then if he disagrees with an inspector, sometimes I will talk to an inspector and say, look, let's bring everybody together, okay? But I agree, it should be courtesy, common courtesy, to say, hey, look, if I don't know before I do it, let me make a phone call. Let me ask somebody. And it should be, all inspectors out there should be very open to saying, well, thank you for calling. I'd love to help you with that, or love to have that kind of conversation. I think that'd be great. But sadly, if you heard the horror stories that I hear across the country, it's like, can we all just get along? But there are some great inspectors out there, really are. And there's some not so great ones, same as electricians. There's some great electricians. And if you go to TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and watch some of the things that gets posted, you'll realize that for every great electrician, there's a shitty one as well. And that's why we continue to teach, okay? We like to convert, okay? So, yep. So I guess that could be, but yeah, I agree, Tom. It should be the courtesy, and we should have that open dialogue. Plans and specifications must be followed. That's another thing that people don't understand. Electrician may do something and not refer to the specification or the drawings, if there are any, and say, well, look, this is the NEC. I'm following the NEC. If the drawings are different, the engineer is responsible for those drawings. If those stamp those drawings, you need to do it in accordance with the specification or the engineer's drawings. If not, you need to get the engineer to change it to see the same way you see it. Because don't expect the inspector to do that. Because I always told my inspectors, look, they got to do it by the drawings. Unless the electrician saw something that was wrong and the inspector says, oh my God, you're right, that is wrong, then they can get with the engineer, because you know what? The engineer needs to learn too, right? That type of thing. All right, so all electrical equipment must be installed per the manufacturer's instructions. Again, goes without saying, if you have instructions that tell you specifically how to do something, then you follow those manufacturer's instructions. Okay, one of the questions that do come up from folks from time to time is, if I have manufacturer's instructions and they go against the minimum safety standard of the NEC, okay, which do I follow? It's really easy. That's just why I have for years have said the NEC is a minimum safety standard, even though some people don't like that terminology. This is why I say it. And you'll understand as an educator why I do this. Number one, it's a minimum safety standard. You can go above the minimum, as long as going above the minimum doesn't cause it to do a 180 and it becomes more hazardous, because you, like grounding and bonding, you did more and you created objectionable currents. That's an example, okay? The other thing is a minimum safety standard helps me put this threshold for explaining to people that if the manufacturer instructions say to do something, but it's going to be less than the minimum safety standard, then you follow the NEC. And people say, well, I'm supposed to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Yes, unless they become unsafe application. And remember, the NEC is a minimum safety standard. So now you folks out there know why I call it that way. So, can a manufacturer go above the minimum? Absolutely. Can they require GFCI on a circuit that may not require GFCI because the manufacturer's instructions want it to be? Absolutely they can. And you follow that. It's more restrictive. But it can't go below the minimum standard. I cannot have a manufacturer tell me, and I work for a manufacturer, I cannot tell you to do something that would circumvent a published, adopted standard in your jurisdiction for safety. This all should make sense. And I don't know why I've had to tell people this for years. I've had some pretty well-known folks that go, I hate when Paul uses the term minimum safety standard. Now you know why. Look, I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. I'm not the youngest kid on the block. Okay. And I'm not always right. But there's a reason why I refer to certain things a certain way, and it's in order to be able to teach people these things. Minimum safety standards are done this way so that a manufacturer can't drop below the minimum, but they can't exceed it. And you can follow you have to follow the manufacturer's instructions until they fall below a minimum safety standard. And then you create a hazard. Do you think the manufacturer wants to be liable for that? Well, they are liable if they're forcing you to do something, typically very common on products that come from China, from other countries, things like that, where they don't have a very robust codes and standards team to look over their documentation very well. And that's where they write things. And was very common for years with EVs and EVSE equipment and all that, where they believed to tell you to do something, but the code was like, no, I need to be at least this. I got to be at least this minimum safety standard. That's why I teach it that way. Okay, guys, I told you I was going to show you something why we change the code every 3 years. So let's go to look at the NEC really quickly. Okay. All right, so this is the 2023 edition of the NEC. And I wanted to show you something in a calculation for 220. Okay. So let me go down here. Y'all heard me talk about this I have a video out for this. 220.83, by the way. So this is talking about determining in an existing dwelling if my service is capable or my feeder is capable to handle additional loads, right? And people have asked me all the time, A versus B. B is talking about where you have to redo the load calculation to see if existing service is capable to handle new additional loads. And here it specifically talks about things like air conditioning and heating, right? Air conditioning and heating. Okay, if you have an additional, right, air conditioning and heating. But what about if you were determining existing loads, say you're just adding an addition to a dwelling, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to add some additional loads. I want to know if the service is adequate or the feeder is adequate. Well, notice that it doesn't say anything in here about HVAC. It just says where additional air conditioning and electric space heating is not to be installed. For years, folks, this led people to think that when I'm doing a calculation for an existing dwelling to see whether or not I had any headroom to be able to add additional things like an addition or whatnot, and other things, that I did not have to add in the AC or the heat because it wasn't mentioned here. That is not true. It was always intended for you to add that AC or the heat, whichever the larger, you add it to the actual over the load. So you're going to be applied demands to it. So the first 8 kVA at 100%, and then the remainder at 40%. That meant that you added in the larger of the heat versus AC. Even though it just says that when you use this, it's if you're not adding any additional AC or heat. But you still had to count for the existing AC or heat if it was there. Now, this was derived many, many, many years ago when we really didn't have HVAC. We might have had window units and things like that. But that's where this was in here, and it's been in there for years. Okay? So that's the way you would do it. Well, if you did have additional AC was being added, then it was pretty straightforward, right? If you were adding additional AC or heat loads, then you would just go down here and use B. And you would just follow the procedures right here, okay? And again, this is all the normal loads. So my easy way of doing this, by the way, real quick, and I'm going to show you what's changing in 2026 to clarify this. And also reassure you that it was what I said it was, okay? Because people are like, I don't know, Paul. I don't think you need to add the larger of the AC versus heat when you're doing it on an existing load. Why the hell would you not? Is the load not there? It's there. It's there, isn't it? You got to account for every load that's there. It just means you lump them all together. Okay, and you treat it as an appliance when you're applying the nameplate values. That's what you do with it. And that's what I've been preaching forever. And there's people on forums that say, well, I guess you don't have to include the AC versus the heat or AC or heat or whichever's larger. That is not true. No, the easiest way to do this when you want to do an existing load, by the way, if you're going to be adding it, is just to redo the whole load calculation because you're going to have to get all the nameplates and round up everything anyway to do this calculation. So you might as well just do it like it's a brand new calculation and then use the optional method because, again, you're trying to make sure that the existing service is okay. So you're going to use the optional method. That's the best way to do it, okay? But just for clarity, yeah, to show you that I was right and that I've had this video out long before the change in the 2026, I'm going to show you now what the 2026 is going to fix this. Okay, so this is the second draft. So it's made it through the second draft. And I want to show you, and it's going to make it through the NITMAM. Here's that same one. Now, also, I want to show you that it has moved now. Now it is in chapter 1. That's where all of your calculations are going, okay? EMS, Emergency Management Systems, is also going right here from 750. It's moving here as well. 110 is still going to be in here. But here, I want to show you here. Now, where is it going? It was 220.83. All you got to remember is 120. That's the only thing you got to remember. And now it's going right here. It's 120.83. It's not a big deal, but it makes sense. It's being moved up into chapter 1, right? So let's click on it here. All right. So here is what it is right now. Okay. So you can see it over here on the right. Existing dwelling application. And let's see here. If I can get it moved, I'll try to get it moved out for you. There we go. All right. Now, let me show you what's changed with this. I hid the legislative text. But the first thing you'll notice is there's no A and B anymore, right? There isn't with AC or without AC. That crap isn't in there anymore, right? It says this section shall be permitted to be used to determine if the existing service feeder is of sufficient capacity to serve additional loads in the dwelling unit, and it is served by a 122 40-volt or a 208Y 123 wire service or feeder. It says the percentage listed in table 120.83, and that's these things down here you got to follow just like before, okay? If they're listed in tables, shall be used for existing and additional loads. And here it added this: the larger connected load, okay? A larger connected load of the AC or the space heating, but not both shall be used, right? So you got to do all load calcs as normal, your small appliances 1500, your laundry at 1500. Then you got to go around and gather all of the nameplate information, right? And then it's also saying that you take the nameplate rating of the following equipment. All appliances, okay? These are appliances. Air conditioners, appliance, space heating, all appliances, okay? So that's where you got to add it here. That's the way it always has been. However, it tells you right here, you're going to take what? The larger connected of the AC or the space heating. So it's very much like the optional method, whereas you don't take the larger of the non-coincident load. You simply look at your air conditioning load, and then you look at your space heating load, and you determine which is larger, that type of thing. If it happens to be a heat pump, then you're just going to take the nameplate values from your heat pump, okay? Follow all those rules normally, okay? So here is, again, first 8 of existing and new. So that would be all of these things here, plus the existing HVAC, whatever you have, or your heating loads, whichever's larger, all of that, okay? And then you would take it, the first 8 would be at 100. The remainder of existing load would be at 40. Then if you have new EVSEs being added, then you take that value at 80%. If you have new central electric resistant heating adding, not the old stuff that was there, but any new stuff, then you take that value at 80%. And then you take all other loads that you may have that aren't encompassed here, and you take those at 50%, okay? And you just add it all up together, and that's how you do it. So what you see is that it was always intended for you to take the existing air conditioning or heat, whichever was the larger, in the calculation. And people misinterpret it as saying, well, no. And look, the people say, well, if a code doesn't say it, then you don't have to use it. Look, this is a common sense thing. You can't just take a load and act like it didn't exist. It's still there. And there's so many people that look at it and go, well, I'm just going to turn a blind eye to it because the code's not mentioning it. That's not true. It's still a load that you have to account for. Okay. So there you go. Okay. Val says there's a question about addition to school, and the square fib. Yeah, I'm not going to go into schools. I got a video on that. Go watch it, Val. That is a very generic question and not enough variables, and that ain't happening. So if you want me to do a question explaining how to do that for schools, then you know to go to paulabernathy.com, or you can go on my YouTube channel and type in school calculations, and you'll probably see the video where I go through that process. I am not doing it on coffee hour at the spur of the moment, but I appreciate the thought. All right. All right. Let's see here. Where are we at? All right. Let's do some giveaways real quick. Hopefully y'all got something out of that, but I thought that was neat to show the change, that type of thing. All right. Let's do some giveaways real quick. And let's see what we got here. All right. Let's spin it. Thank y'all. I went over again today. As always, I'm always going over. All right, Tara Williams, you are in the drawing for Trade Hog. The basic Trade Hog. Congratulations. That drawing will be June 30th. Or on about June 30th. Let's see what we got here. You also in the drawing for that. Battles Electric. Same thing. All right, let's do another one. Let's go. Great lesson today in understanding how the NEC works. It's a must-watch video for anybody. Instant win! Rob, you win a wire waffle. Make sure you email me your address and information for your instant wire waffle. And put it to use and let us know. Hashtag wire waffle, folks. So you want an instant wire waffle. Congratulations. Give it a shot. That type of thing. Okay. All right, let's go here. Good job, Rob. That's an instant win, buddy. Send me your information. Email address, full name, everything. Sometimes just the basics. Skyaddy or Skyaddle or whatever that is, you get Fast Tracks Tube. If you already have it, let me know. If not, go to fasttrackstube.com, register for a free registration, and then let us know, and we will update you to an annual subscription. Let's see here. All right, let's go again. If you don't know how to register, let me know. I'm more than happy to show you. If you already have it, I'll spin again. Let me know. What do we got? What do we got? Carlos Chavez. You got the registration for the NFC card. Those are awesome NFC cards. They are available on our website. They used to be expensive because we would program them and develop websites and all. Now it's using Linktree. It's easy because Linktree is free. So that's what we use, and it just makes it neat. This is our promotional coffee hour. This is to share the love, but you can reprogram this to anything you want. Tap whatever you want. You want to see how that works real quick? My contact thing is not so good on my phone, so bear with me while I do that. So let's turn on the NFC, and I'll show you how that works. All right, so you got it near your phone. You got to know where your NFC chip is, by the way. All right, so I've got it on my phone, and I'll just come up here, and it'll pull up whatever browser you want. I have multiple browsers, so I like multiple browsers. So there you go, and this happens to be programmed to my Linktree. I know it's hard to see it, but this has all of our social media, our websites, our store, everything on there. Well, you can have it pull up anything you want. So that's what's neat about these. Use it as a business card, tap it and share the show, or you can reprogram it and tap people's cards for the get them to your website, or your maybe you have a pay portal that you can tap up, all that kind of stuff. Okay? Anywho, congratulations on being in the drawing for that. Let's do another giveaway. Let's go. If you're not incorporating NFC in your company some way, you really should. Every customer should be able to tap a customer on their phone. Pays to be on multiple platforms, doesn't it, Jonathan? All right. So you got an instant wire waffle. So make sure you reach out to me with your address so we can send you a wire waffle. All righty. All right, folks. I believe I'm going to let you go. That is it for today. Congratulations to all that won. It was a great show today. I'm glad you joined me. We learned a little bit about the NEC, how it's structured, how things are laid out, what the little notes mean, what the little the ends and the margins, the dots and the margins. We learned what's permissive rules, mandatory rules. We learned a significant change to the 2026, and you're going to see, I'm a big believer that probably, other than what they did with the equipment ground in Code Panel 5, other than that, I think that the 2026 is going to be great. Why do we change it every 3 years? Because we're finding mistakes. We're making things clearer. We're making it a little easier to navigate. We're adding new things. New technologies come along, rapidly changing, like fault managed systems, all those type of things are rapidly changing. Electricity is always changing, things like that. Now, there are some crappy stuff that gets put in there, some stuff that don't make sense. Why it's added, I don't know, but they convinced a code panel. I get it. Kind of like this island issue. Oh, that is funny. That is funny. Before I let you go, if you got to leave, you can leave. But let's go see what they're going to do with that island in 2026, since I figured, what the hell? Let's go see. Why not? Let's do it. It's just fun time, folks. Yeah, I understand if you got to go. I get it. So let's go see what they're going to do with this island. Let's see what it says. Let's see here. Let's go down. This is fun time now. All right, let's see what we're doing here. All right, here we go. Let's see what they do here. Counter workspace. Oh, okay. Look at here. Okay. Countertop and works receptacle outlets. The receptacles installed for countertop and similar work surfaces as specified in 210.52c. Okay, I haven't got to C yet. All right. Okay, C shall not be considered as a receptacle outlet required by 210.52a. Okay, right. These are if it's installed for the countertop or similar work surface. It's not necessarily for the ones that are for the spacing requirement. I got that. Receptacle outlets location prohibited. See, all this is grayed out. It says where receptacle outlets are installed in spaces covered in 210.52a23. Okay, A23. Let's see, A23. The space afforded by fixed room dividers, such as freestanding bar type counters. Okay, I think it's A23. Okay, all right. Says so where receptacle outlets are installed in spaces covered by 210.52a23, and the outlets are below the countertop and work surfaces, they shall not be installed within 24 inches of the countertop or work surface. Okay, so what that means, by the way, just so you know, language can be confusing. So where I may have a receptacle that's required in the fixed divider, it has to be down low. And you've heard me talk about this, saying, well, just because I can't have a receptacle on island to serve the countertop, because that was removed in 2023, I still I had to have a receptacle on it if it was considered a room divider. Then I'd have to have a receptacle down low. But I can have a receptacle down low but it has to be at least 24 inches away from the countertop because most of the appliances that are going to go on the island or peninsula are going to be a 24-inch long cord, so it's not going to reach. So that's how they're getting around that. So I could have a receptacle down low. It's just not there to serve the countertop. That makes sense. I mean, if you're going to do what you're going to do, I'm okay with that, right? All right, let's see here. Let's go on. All right, so then we're going to get to the one we want to look at right here. Islands and peninsular countertops and work surfaces. Okay. It says, if provided, so that's the same. That didn't go anywhere. It says, if provided, that if is important because it means it's not required. It's if that's provided to serve the island or peninsula countertop or work surface. It says, receptacle outlets shall be installed in accordance with 210.52C3. Okay, so that is right here. This is the locations, okay. And 210.52C4. So I have a C3 and I have a C4. Gotcha. All right. And it says if a receptacle outlet is not provided to serve the island or peninsula countertop or work surface, it says electrical provisions shall be provided at the island or peninsula for future additions of a receptacle outlet to serve the island or peninsula countertop or work surface. Okay, makes sense. So that is not different, okay? That means that if you choose to not provide one, you still got to make sure there's provisions there, right? So what does that provision mean? That provision means that I can either be an unfinished basement. I could get to it later. I put a raceway over there to pull it in later. I could put the circuit there, small appliance branch circuit there, and put it in a junction box and cap it off if I want. But there, you know what I'm saying? All right, okay. All right, I get it. That's what the provisions mean. All right, so there's that. Now, it gets down here. So receptacle locations. Okay, here we go. So receptacle outlets shall be located in one or more of the following. Okay, on or above. All right, but not more than 20 inches above the countertop. Okay, makes sense. So for those that aren't familiar with this rule, on or above, tombstone, pop-up, whatnot, on or above, or it can be put in the cabinet above the countertop, okay? If you happen to have what's like a peninsula with a cabinet that comes over it, then you could have one up there as long as it's not more than 20 inches. Makes sense. I don't have a problem with that. It says, it can be in the countertop using receptacle outlet assemblies listed for use in a countertop. So we're not talking about those relocatable power taps with the cord plug attachment onto it or a cord cap. We're talking about hardwired. They're designed, they're listed, they're expensive, and I'm not cutting any granite. I'm just saying. So somebody else better cut that hole because I ain't cutting it. I'm just saying. Next it says, in a work surface using receptacle outlet assemblies listed for use in work surfaces or listed for use in the countertops. So you can buy countertops or you can buy a lot of the manufacturers that are making these today actually buy them built in. So it's part of it. Okay, so it's part of the entire cabinet. It's built in, part of the assembly. Then it's part of it, then I don't, that's okay. It can be in that work surface. It was built into it, and that's what it's allowing. Okay, make sense? Okay. Let's see. It says receptacles rendered not readily accessible, okay, by appliance fastened fastened in place. Okay, that would be something behind, say, a dishwasher, right? Or something that is in an appliance garage, which is those little things that you put your appliances in and you open it up and down. It sits on the counter, okay? Or rendered inaccessible by a sink or range tops as covered in 210.52C1, exception number 1. Okay, that is the place behind it. That is this type of stuff right here, okay? Right there, that's the exception for when it's not considered behind it. I got that. It says, okay, that's not important to what we want to look at. This is what we want to look at right here. All right. Now, receptacle outlets locations prohibited. Okay, it says required and permitted receptacle outlets. All right, let me get rid of this legislation text so we can just see what the code says, because sometimes that legislative stuff is crappy when you're trying to read code. So we'll turn it off. It says required and permitted receptacle outlets installed in a location that is accessible outside the cabinet or wall surface that are below the countertops and work surfaces shall comply with the following. So those that are required or that are permitted have to follow these. So the first thing it's going to say, receptacle outlets shall not be installed on adjacent walls extending from the base cabinet within 24 inches. Okay. All right. So example, we had an allowance up here where it is for us to be able to have a receptacle below the countertop. Okay. As long as it's down, at least 24 inches. So that was okay. That's allowed. So that's below the countertop. All right. That's fine. That's what it's talking about. It's allowed to be there. That's a permitted one to be there, or required if it is wall space and I still have to have a receptacle there, okay? So it's not typically going to be allowed there to serve the countertop, but it might be there because of wall spacing. I got you. So that would be the receptacle outlet that shall not be installed on adjacent walls extending from the base cabinet within 24 inches. Got it. And it says receptacle outlets beneath countertops shall not be located within 24 inches of the countertop or work surface. Okay. Exception. The exception says receptacle outlets installed in a drawer shall be permitted to be installed below countertops and work surfaces. Okay, so this is the one that's going to need a little clarity. When it says installed in the drawer, and again, this is where we got to, hopefully, we can go look at the commentary, and I don't want to do that because it could have a nitman change. But when we read that language, it says receptacle outlets installed in a drawer shall be permitted to be installed below countertops and work surfaces. So we're going to assume that it's a receptacle that's installed in the drawer. Does it mean it's in the front face of the drawer it can be below? Does it mean it's got to be installed in the drawer? And if it's in the drawer, if that drawer moves in and out, how are we securing it? That type of thing. Is it, the drawer move? That's why I'm not big on this one because I don't know that that's, Now we could go look at I don't know that we have the SR. I don't know if it shows. Yeah, so this is the SR, okay? This is the second revision, right? And you see that we had deleted, okay? It sees what it says. It says, requirements for installation in a location that is accessible outside the cabinet or wall surface that are below. So this one right here implies that it's really installed into the surface because the premise here is talking about the permitted or the required and permitted receptacle outlets installed in a location that is accessible outside of the cabinet or wall surface that are below, right? And then you have these. And this exception is for receptacle outlets, okay, installed in a drawer shall be permitted to be installed below countertops and work surfaces. Not a whole lot of clarity in this. So here's the committee's language. Okay, let's see all that voted for it. We have some people that commented. All right, I don't know. Anyway, it says the language is revised to clarify the restricted locations for receptacle outlets extending beyond and below the countertop surface. The language is moved to 210.52A5 to permit a receptacle on a wall located on the back side of a cabinet. Okay, that's what we're talking about, on the back side, but not within 24 inches of the countertop. Yeah, so that is important. That is the code panel's statement, but they didn't go any further, right? In my opinion, they could have gone further to do what? To explain this exception a little bit better, okay? I get what they're doing, but they didn't go further enough to explain the exception. Now, if we look at the PCs, these are public comments, and you see these are who submitted these. So let's see here. There's one that was submitted here by this gentleman. There was one that was submitted here who did this one. Okay, this is Ryan. Okay, Ryan submitted something. I know Ryan would be good to talk about whether or not he thought that this was adequately met. And then there's Doug Hansen submitted this one. Okay, and this one was rejected. Let's see here. Let's see what Ryan had to say here. So here's what the way Ryan wrote this one. Okay, and let's see here. This was a code violation in the first draft. It says, as written in the first draft, and let's see, what did they do? Did they rejected but C? Okay. It says, as written in the first draft, a receptacle under a sink for a disposer is a violation. Okay. So if is a receptacle in the knee hole space, a space typically consumed by a chair, that would be like you're sitting at a table, a workspace, beneath the work surface, such as those commonly found in built-in desks, and he has an attached video, but we know what he's talking about. It says, the concern is receptacles within 24 inches beneath the countertop. There is no reason to prohibit receptacles below the countertop if they are more than 24 inches below the top of it. I agree. The second exception is marked for deletion because revised language in the comment removes the need for it, and the companion comment seeks to relocate to 210.52c1 exception. Okay, I don't need to see any of that type of stuff. So nobody's addressing the issue about the drawer right here, this exception right here. So we're going to have to assume at this point that it means a receptacle that is below the countertop, that it's installed inside of a drawer. So if I pull the drawer out, that there's a receptacle that's in there for some reason, or some type of drawer that would allow you to put equipment in there, that type of thing. And we can't assume that they mean that you can put it in the front of a drawer. That would make no sense at all. But can I see where it's going to be misapplied for somebody to do that? Now, no builder is going to want somebody to take up a drawer, right? The face of a drawer kind of goes against the whole reason they argued to get rid of the receptacles in the first place. It really was, to me, they said it was a safety concern. I get there's data out there, but I call bullshit. So when at the end of the day, this was originally submitted. If you go back and look at it, a lot of this stuff was brought up because everybody hated putting receptacles in their $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 custom peninsula or islands. And so you know this as an inspector. You've had homeowners, you've had designers and builders bitch about it. So they originally, if you go back and read the information, one of the people that submitted it was the building industry, okay, the builders. And then ultimately when this happened, they tried to get it removed and said, well, wait a minute, we're kind of okay now because now we created an issue, right? And my issue is that people are going to come in and cut receptacles in later. I already saw that on social media where people are already saying that. They're going to say, well, dude, I'm just going to cut one in later once it's inspected and the final's already done. They're already going to do it. And chances are they don't care how much overhang there is at that point. They're going to still stick one in there. Okay. So what I do like about this change is at least now it makes sense that I can have a receptacle below the countertop as long as it's more than 24 inches below to serve maybe the wall space or maybe to serve something that's at this built-in cabinet or built-in desk. As long as it's below 24, that's fine. That'd be all right. And I think the whole intent is, again, they just don't want a receptacle below the countertop. And I believe that the problem with this rule, the way it's written, is the charging statement talks about the countertops. And if you go back and look at the rule real quick, this is where I think they need to maybe going to fix it in a NITMAM. I don't know. Is right here. This is the part that I have a problem with. It says required and permitted receptacles installed in a location that is accessible outside the cabinet or wall surface that are below the countertop. Why would you need an exception for a receptacle outlet that's located in the drawer when this whole premise of this rule says located that are accessible what? Below countertop, that are accessible outside of the cabinet. Not inside of it, outside of it. So again, this one right here is riddled for a bit of confusion. Okay, so here's my advice to you. Follow the language. As much as I hate it, follow the language in 2023, even when this comes out. Yes, you're allowed to put a receptacle below the countertop as long as it's 24 inches down. because it's not going to be serving the countertop. It's maybe serving a wall space requirement in 21052A, or it may be for some other use because you can put extra receptacles in if you want. You can always have additional ones. I think that's okay, and that's what 2026 is going to clear up. I think that the one that it makes for the drawer, I cannot fathom that they would say you can't have it below the countertop, but now all of a sudden I'll let you stick it in the face of a drawer because of how this language is. I think it really means inside the drawer or inside of the cabinet, allowing for that. I think that's what I think they're trying to say, but I think you can agree that this whole thing is messy. And I don't know. I didn't submit an Itman for it, so I don't know. I think it's a little messy. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. I know there's educated. Ryan will tell me. Ryan, email me if you're watching. Vince, email me if you're right. Tell me, Paul, you're just reading it wrong. I'm just reading what it says, and it's messy. So my advice is just follow the 2023. Don't put any receptacles that are going to be for the countertop. If you're installing the circuit to the countertop for future use, don't go cut one in for the countertop. Okay, just keep it above the countertop, on or above. And if you need to put in a receptacle to do a room spacing requirement, or you want to put one down lower, that type of thing, or if you want to put one in underneath the cabinet, down low inside of it, then I'm okay with that as long as it's 24 inches away from the countertop. Then nothing prohibits you from doing that. You just can't move it up closer because somebody could misconstrue that is there to serve the countertop. And somebody could plug a 24-inch cord into it or a crock pot, and you could have it pulled off the counter if that is what the world is concerned with. I hate to see any child get hurt, but you know what? We can't protect everybody from everything. I'm just saying. So y'all know my opinion on that. All right, enough of that. I went over too long again, but I figured I'd just throw that out there. Why not? What the hell? All right, it's my show, my rules. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless, and I'll catch you on another episode of Coffee Hour with a plural. S. Coffee Hours. What do you think, Adam? Peace. Hey, folks, you might have taken off and run away, and I know you have, but I think I found a cute comment. Samantha, if you're still here, are you talking about how to pronounce peninsula, peninsular? Two different things. A peninsula is an island that's surrounded on three sides by a body of water. A peninsular, okay, is what you have in your kitchen, which basically one side is connected to the wall and you have three open sides. So a peninsula and peninsular. That's the difference. Is that what you're talking about? I'm just saying. All right, folks. Peace. Oh, of course, an island is surrounded on all sides by water, and so is an island in your kitchen. I'm just saying. Peace.